time. I hope this isn't too long a presentation, but we've got a lot to get through and not a lot of time to get through it. That's a lie. We've got all the time in the world to talk about the wonderful, magical, mystery experience of time. So we're going to be talking about time. What is it? How is it? Why is it? And perhaps most importantly, when is it?
Wow.
You've
chosen a big one here,
I know,
Jen.
this is a big subject.
Oh my gosh. I'm excited.
Like, where are we going?
Nat, Rach, have you ever experienced time before?
Have I ever experienced time? Yes.
It feels like a trick question, though.
Before when? Before what? Now? Before now? Yes.
Yeah, before this very moment.
I have experienced time before this moment, yeah.
But then you're always in a perpetual moment of now. And then...
Are you?
Can you experience...
Can you?
The time.
What is time?
Well, we're going to find out. We're going to find out all about time. And we will begin with... The Cambridge English Dictionary describes an hour as a period of 60 minutes.
Mm-hmm. That's true.
That's not particularly helpful, obviously. Wikipedia, however, describes an hour as 1/24th of a day with a conditional amount of actual time depending on certain conditions. As a day is not actually the same time every single day.
Mm-hmm.
I'm really interested to see where you go with this because you may have plucked an idea straight out of what I was going to do.
Oh god, I haven't ruined your next presentation.
No, not today's.
Okay.
You both just happen to have been doing a presentation on time.
No, but I do have facts about minutes and days and...
Well.
You did do one on chronobiology, so...
Yeah, you did. In ancient ages, humans didn't actually measure time in the same way that we do now. In ancient Greek, they had the 24 aura. They had 12 hours from sunset to sunrise, and they also had a different 12 hours from sunrise to sunset. This meant that hours in ancient Greek were different throughout the entire year.
Right.
The different aura had different gods attached to them, such as Gymnastica being the 4th hour of the day, a god devoted to exercise.
Because obviously the length between sunset and sunrise gets, it's shorter different in the summer and longer in the winter. So would it just be smaller units of time, like divided into 12?
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. That's
so
basically exactly what they did.
You don't have to exercise as much in the winter. Nice.
I don't think you'd want to exercise quite as much in the winter, really, if we're being honest.
Unless what's the Wim Hof or something? What's the the guy who just gets frozen cold on purpose? I don't remember the details.
You're referencing our cousin show, Cringe Corner.
In ancient China, instead of using 24 hours, they split the day into 100 equal periods called Ke, which started at midnight, but by 200 BC, they also swapped to 24 hours, split into 12 hours. In this system, the hours referred to the 12 animals of the zodiac. So the Greeks, the hours were the different gods. In China, the hours referred to the zodiac. Also in ancient Egypt, they split the day into 10 hours and the night into 12 hours. You could tell what time it was in the night by where the stars were, and then you could use charts to refer to what time of day it was, basically. So you looked in the sky, you saw where the stars were, and you said, it's 10 p.m.
Mm-hmm.
That's really interesting.
These charts were also found on the inside of tombs, so that the dead could tell the time at night. Because obviously, ancient Egyptians, they believed that, the afterlife, and that's why all of the tombs had lots of stuff in it, and they buried servants alive in there, etc., etc., etc.
So, China started off with a metric system for telling time throughout the day, and then they switched to 24 hours.
But
interesting.
Base 12 is just so much more convenient than base 10 for calculating things. You can divide more stuff into it. Stupid tens.
Yeah.
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 True.
So much like the ancient Greeks and the ancient Chinese, these hours referred to specific gods to the Egyptians. So people think that the reason that so many cultures went for a 24-hour time is because of the Egyptians, and the concept was just transposed onto different belief systems as trade and immigration and stuff all just sort of found their way around the world. It's much easier for everybody to use the same time system, and it just sort of happened. Throughout most of human history, no matter how many hours there were in a day, they were different based on the time of year. It was the Greek astronomer Hipparchus in around 130 BC who suggested the 24 equal parts concept. He did this primarily because it was difficult to make accurate measurements of the stars when time wasn't consistent.
Right.
Astronomy in those times was calculated by using Babylonian maths, because it was. And due to reasons, they used a base 60 counting system. So we use base 10, which is 1 to 10. You've obviously mentioned base 12, which is 1 to 12, but base 60 is 1 to 60.
Meaning they have a different word for every single one up to 60 before they start repeating themselves.
Yeah, which is a lot. So much. The thing is, doesn't France have a base 60 counting system?
Well, but they still do. I don't understand.
Or is it base 20? I can't remember.
Oh, but they just they have for their 90.
The 80 is like 420s,
they say,
right?
Yeah, 80 is 420, and then 90 is 420 10, and then 99 is 420 10 9.
Nice.
Silly.
To make Greek astronomers' lives easier, they split the equal hours of the day into equal minutes of 60 because of this base 60 calculation stuff, and then those minutes into 60 seconds. And that's why we have 60 minutes and 60 seconds. So it all goes back to the Babylonians.
But do you know why seconds are called seconds?
No.
Because they were like an invention, right? And then they were also going to be thirds and fourths, and the smaller you go, the higher the number goes, but nobody ever uses a third. And
so
they
tend to,
and they get metric from that point on. So a second is a 60th of a minute, and then a third is a 60th of a second.
Right.
Okay.
But nobody ever uses that, and they use like by the point in time where it became useful to break them up smaller than that, we were kind of using metric.
So minutes and seconds, they weren't really used much by the general population because there was no real accurate way to measure time for thousands and thousands of years. Generally, they'd use things like sundials. However, this obviously didn't work if it was nighttime or if it was overcast, because it wouldn't leave a shadow, which I reckon contributed to the difference between day and night, but I couldn't find any actual information about that. I'm just making it off the top of my head. Ancient Egyptians had complex water clocks.
If they didn't use minutes, how did they boil eggs? Riddle me that.
Well, I mean, I'm going to tell you how they boiled eggs.
Okay.
By using complex water clocks. Ancient Egyptians would fill up a particular volume or conversely empty a particular volume, and you could use this like time taken for the water to move as a measurement of a certain period of time. You couldn't really use it in the same way that we would use a clock, so it was more like a stopwatch.
Right.
But apparently early debate bros would use them to make sure they had equal time to debate.
That's cute. like at the chessboard, like you have the little as you're doing chess moves. They're there with the timer, like, come on, it's my turn.
You only get 20 minutes. Well, they wouldn't call it that. You only get 20 bowls.
20 bowls.
You can see in the middle here, we've got a really complex water clock where the way it drains moves a little arm on a clock
That is cool.
face. I think what it's doing is it's putting a weight there, so the water pulls a weight and that moves the clock hand. But that's a considerably more complicated water clock than the sort of thing that they would use in like ancient Egypt. The water clock is a somewhat similar concept to the hourglass,
Yeah.
Which came a little bit later. It was invented by 8th century monks. They invented the hourglass to replace the water clock because they kept getting their paper wet when they were playing Pictionary.
Truly? I mean, they doodle a lot.
No, of course not.
They did doodle a lot, though. The monks and all writing the things.
Yeah, but that was a joke about how the only real place you get hourglasses nowadays is in a box of Pictionary.
Oh. You know, the game that I thought of was Dingbats.
Yeah. You only really get them in little board games now. You don't really get them in kitchens and stuff because we got electric timers and stuff. Hourglasses were incredibly useful on ships where they could be used to accurately measure a period of time, which you couldn't really do with water clocks because the water would slosh around. But with hourglasses, you could do it really easily. What you would do is you would use that time to measure longitude, so from east to west. So you'd measure how far you travelled based in a period of time, and then you could figure out where you were, basically. Complicated maths stuff. But they had it on basically every ship from like the 13th century or something. It wasn't until manual clocks started to appear in the 14th century that time as we know it started to happen. Apologies to anyone who has a fear of clocks with this particular slide. Early mechanical clocks tended to be split into quarters or 12s. And it's only when they started getting more accurate in the 16th century that minutes and seconds became a viable thing to add to clocks and watches.
Yeah, it's amazing, isn't it? Just amazing seeing those like smaller divisions of time crop up in like regular use. Just thinking about how our lives change around around the ability to tell time. Like our expectations of each other have changed so much. With I'm seeking a diagnosis for ADHD. And I sometimes wonder about, like, what my life would be like if I lived in a world that wasn't, divided into minutes at all, right? Like, just some people still use, like, slow clocks that only have the hour divided into those quarters. So that maybe I should do that. Maybe that would make stuff nicer. Because then I'd have to be, if I was trying to get somewhere on time, I'd have to leave within that previous 15 minutes, like before, rather than like on the dot and be late, which is what always happens. So maybe we should do that.
So clockmakers took the units from astronomers who were still using the 60-minute, 60-second version of time from way back in Hipparchus's time. So they took this measurement, this clock measurement, basically, that was being used for thousands and thousands and thousands of years, but specifically by astronomers, into the everyday usage of a clock. So for over 1,000 years, the only people using time in the same way that we use time now were weirdos who had terrible neck pain from looking at the stars too much.
So much of that stuff comes from astronomers, right? Like, they're the people who are like creating all the maths that we use now.
And it's weird because I always think that people who look into the stars are a bit boring.
But there's so much going on out there.
Yeah,
no idea what it is.
Yeah, there's not much.
And I live in London, so it's pretty hard to look at the stars out here.
Yeah,
that's what
I suppose. So, yeah.
That's what
I've never seen more than
Egypt.
About 30
like,
stars in the sky.
Would they? Am I making this up? That Egypt wouldn't have much cloud cover most of the time, like, because they're not reliant on rainfall for water in like around the Nile. Like, the Nile was where they got their water from. So, and the rainfall happened like somewhere else.
Sounds reasonable.
Okay, so we had agreed collectively, at least in Europe, that a day was 24 hours, an hour was 60 minutes, etc., etc., etc. However, the world wasn't quite standardised yet, and even countries weren't standardised themselves. It was still a tendency for hyperlocal areas to have their own specific time zone, where two towns from just across from each other could have wildly different times by like 10 or 15 minutes, out of sync.
That's funny.
And from one end of the country to another, it could be much, much longer, I was think, up to an hour. For 400 years, this didn't really matter because the length of time it took to travel between two places was so long that there was no need for those places to be in sync.
Right.
However, with the advent of the train, this started to become a problem.
That makes sense.
Not only were trains fast and could make the difference in time noticeable, they also had timetables. It was entirely possible for a train to leave a station at 9 a.m. and arrive at another station at 9 a.m.
Right. Yeah. No good. Not practical.
No. As this is a wonderful image that I found on a free royalty-free.
I know. Sometimes you do.
Oh, that's curious.
Yeah, some good ones.
Yeah.
It's like a lovely photo of a train and also a rhino.
And the rhino's like, it's late. What the hell?
Why is the rhino standing on a rock? That rock does not look particularly safe.
Very nervous for this.
Okay, who made this? Who made this? Why did they make it? What purpose did they have for putting a rhino on a rock with a old-timey train?
Why not?
Yeah,
is
it's
the only
like
question that matters.
it's a bad image, but it is still a better image than I could make.
It's a treat.
Yeah.
It's a treat for me right
It's
now.
a treat
for my
yeah.
eyes.
In the UK, this unification resulted in GMT, or Greenwich Mean Time, which was created in 1847, unifying the entire country into one time zone, which was the exact time zone of Greenwich.
Mm-hmm. I've been there.
As
Local
you
areas-
would, like,
Yeah.
I've been to Greenwich.
if I was going to standardise the whole world to one spot, you know which spot I would choose?
My
Greenwich.
ass.
Yeah, or Greenwich. So
Local
good.
areas.
Maybe Slough, I don't know.
Could you?
Well, the reason it was Greenwich was because Greenwich had an observatory. And once again, we're going back to the astronomers. Ugh.
Always.
I'm gonna start beef with astronomers, I think.
Beat 'em up. Those nerds.
And so we had the astronomy tower in Greenwich, which you cannot use as an astronomy tower because it's in the middle of bloody London now.
Yeah.
Local areas often kept their own local time zone. Like Bristol, for example, has two arms on its clock. Did you know that? It's really interesting information.
Yeah, I knew that. I did know that. I'm going there next week. I was Googling.
Obviously, that starts to fade out over time, but you do get people play places like Bristol, which are weird places, full of like weirdos, who have two arms in their clocks. As the world started to become smaller due to trade and empire, because it wouldn't be an episode of Next Slide Please without a mention of colonialism, a conference called the International Meridian Conference was held in 1884. The purpose of this conference was to standardise time across the Earth. They decided that GMT would be considered the start of the day and that local times would be considered GMT plus or minus however many hours. And that's how it is today. This is what time is for us now. A few places over the years have swapped time zones for various different reasons, including, to be closer to their trading partners, or in the case of China, to have one centralized time zone for their entire country, despite the fact that it spans 3 time zones.
I was going to say, if you look down from Britain and you see all the green GMT time zones, and some of them are like yellow and some of them are green and some of them like stick out and they're green and some of them stick out and they're yellow, that's colonialism that did that. That's Britain wanting to match up with its like like British colonies in Africa.
So there have been changes here and there, but generally what was decided in 1884 is what we have now, which is kind of wild, right?
And is India like on a half
And that
hour?
is...
It's not a full hour either way.
Yes. Yeah, some countries also don't... they're still like... International standards wise, they're still +1, but they're +1.5 as opposed to anything else. They're still with Greenwich Mean Time, although it's now called Coordinated Universal
Speaking
Time,
of
I think
maps
is what it's
being
called.
rubbish, look at the relative sizes of the UK and India on this map. Nonsense.
Right. Boo, Mercator maps. Boo. Boo.
There's an episode idea for you there. Do an episode on maps.
Considered it, yeah.
You've considered it, have you? So anyway, that is the history of time in a brief 20-minute video. Did you learn anything new about time?
Yes.
I'll tell you. I was researching to make an episode on this precise topic. Do you want to?
Wow.
Do you want to hear the because as an outgrowth of the chronobiology one, do you want to hear the fact that I learned after I made the chronobiology one that's kind of interesting? Is
yes.
I would love
for
to hear
thousands of years, ending actually kind of early in the 1900s, but probably like fading out for a while before that. People used to get up in the middle of the night for like an hour. Like at midnight, they'd get up. It was just normal thing to sleep in two
I keep hearing
chunks.
that. And that sounds so strange to me that I'm like, is that kind of just a made up thing that people are saying now?
I don't think so.
I'm relieved to hear.
Yeah,
like,
I think it's
actually like...
It's a thing. And
the thing is, I regularly do that anyway, because like, I'll finish work at 5, have a nap at sort of 6 o'clock, sleep for sort of 2.5 hours, 3 hours, be up from sort of 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock until sort of 2 o'clock, and then go to bed and wake up again in the morning.
Yeah, for me it's like I get up at midnight, get an hour of stuff done really productively, and then go back to sleep. Or like 1 o'clock in the morning. I don't do it anymore because I don't.
I just sit there watching Big Bang Theory clips on YouTube.
I used to.
Yeah.
Did you know that in Bristol they have a clock?
Are you gonna be contrarian? Are you gonna be contrarian?
No, I was just gonna say because I'm going to Bristol next week, so I was looking up things about Bristol, and they have a clock that's like 10 minutes faster or 10 minutes slower than GMT, and so it's got 2-minute hands, because by the time was standardized, they wanted to keep their own time and also show the time of show London time, so they've got 2 minutes.
That's really
snip. I'm talking about this later.
Okay.
Snip.